Probably the next most common tree here at Canal Park would be the silver maple or soft maple. This plant has opposite simple lobe leaves. And let's talk a little bit about that. You'll notice here the leaves are simple and each leaf comes out of its own bud. So it's simple, but it is lobed. And let's count the lobes here on this silver maple. Now sometimes you can get a little confusing with sugar maple or red maple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lobes appearing in this one right here. Now you will notice too, let's go back up to here, that the leaves come out opposite of each other. Now I know these look like little branches, but before these branches started there was actually a bud there that was a leaf. It's just opposite, they come out directly across from each other. Another cool thing we noticed about this sugar maple, or silver maple this morning, is that this set of leaves is coming out this direction. This set of leaves next above it is almost at a 90-degree turn. And then it alternates again here, running this way, and then this set of leaves is again. So it looks like these are running roughly north and south, these are running east and west. Now the tree produces and is already done with flowering, and you may have seen these earlier this spring. They started out reddish and then went greenish on the flowers. They were wind pollinated, though in its cousin the red maple there is some suspicion that insects also play a part. And they resulted in and they're already falling. In fact, one of the bragging points of the silver maple is that it probably produces the largest samaras or fruits of the maple family, and they're already falling to the ground. Okay, so what's a samara? Well, samara is a winged seed that in botanical terms is indehiscent, which means it doesn't split at maturity. This part of the seed coating will actually disintegrate in the soil over a period of time, so the inside seed can then germinate and produce a new maple tree. But I have found and strongly suspect that some of our large fruitivorous birds have been enjoying some of the younger seeds, breaking them open and eating. So the silver maple, probably the second most common tree here at Canal Park. One of the reasons the silver maple is very common is habitat preference. It is, like the sycamore, a signature species for this type of habitat. Especially if you look just below the towpath, down into the very wet, swampy area that leads out into the Scioto River from Canal Park here. The greatest majority of the trees standing out in that wet area consists of silver maples and cottonwood that can stand the extremely wet feet that those areas provide. We have quite a few Buckeye trees, the namesake for our state. Now these trees normally like moist, shaded ravines. So they're not really going to grow in a swamp. And you think, what does that mean here along a river plain? Well, if we take a look at this towpath and the way it was built and the slope, and consider that in the 1820s, 30s when this canal was being built, it was the rich bottomland dirt that was being piled up along this towpath. We had created a perfect spot for Buckeye trees to flourish. Let's take a look at about the anatomical characteristics of it. This Buckeye tree has opposite leaves that are coming out that is combined 5 compound leaflets that are shaped in a palmate, like your hand fashion. So that makes it sort of stand out. It's easy to see with that. It's in the horse chestnut family, the horse chestnut having a spiny fruit, like the Buckeye. And speaking of fruits, this tree flowered a little earlier in the year with its raceme-like complete flowers coming up off the ends of the stems and will produce a spiny husked poisonous fruit, though not the squirrels, which are already, you can see the fruits are already forming right here along the raceme of the flower. The trees we've talked about, like the sycamore, which had its own distinctive bark, the silver maple, which I didn't mention the bark at the time, but has a shreddy bark. Then we arrived at the Buckeye tree, which tends to have a little bit of a smooth but platy bark as the tree gets older. Brings us to a tree with extremely smooth bark. It stands out in a couple different ways. Been a little smaller. It's what we call an understory tree, in that it doesn't get as tall as the others, but this is our pawpaw tree. More famous for its fruit than anything, and you'll notice it has extremely smooth bark. One of the characteristics of recognizing the tree this time of year, though it's not as leafy as it will be later, these leaves are going to grow as time goes on to where they're going to be 6-7 inches long, is alternate, bud here, not opposite like we saw in the maples and the Buckeye, simple and untoothed leaves that are somewhat lance bell shaped. And these leaves are still developing. Not long ago, this tree just finished flowering. And it had a unique 6-petal flower, of which this one is degrading, but it's still there for us to see it. And once it's pollinated by insects, these will be the very start of what pawpaws it will form, which is a yellowish to brownish fruit when ripe, greenish for most of the year, will be anywhere from 3 to 6 inches long. And depending on whether or not insects get to it or not, when it ripens for a brief period of time, it's edible. And it tastes, to some people, a little bit like bananas. It is in the apple custard family, which has a lot of tropical members. So the pawpaw tree, one of our native fruiting trees. We're actually right down here into a river bottom / almost swamp woods. And we're going to look at some of the species that don't mind having or keeping their feet a little wet. And while we're doing this, we'll talk a little bit about bark. This is a member of the maple family, known as a box elder, or also an ash-leaf maple. Now, the reason it's called an ash-leaf maple was due to these compound alternate leaves, just like the maple, just like the ash had. So you can see this leaf comes out across from that one. There's 3 leaves on a single petiole. That's what we call a compound. And there's actually 3 of them. And this plant is a little young. And another characteristic that helps you recognize these is the very green stems. So when you look at tree ID, sometimes it's best basically early in the year or late in the year when they don't have leaves fully formed. This one does. They're without distinguishing fruits, or they've lost their leaves. It's best to use what I call a holistic approach to tree ID. And holistic simply means you use a lot of different clues in the environment to figure out what type of tree it is. So we're in somewhat of a wet area. It's a younger recovering forest, and I'll talk about that in a second, how I know that. This tree can grow in a wide variety of habitats, and it normally likes wetter areas, but you can find it in recovering areas along streams or the edges of fields, the ash-leaf maple or the box elder. Another way that I can also use as a clue is, as I mentioned earlier, the greenness of the stems, the habitat where it's at, and in this case it has its leaves. Now, like the rest of its cousins in the maple family, and this one wasn't old enough to do it, though they're flowering now, they will form 2 samaras, just like the silver maple that I showed you up on the towpath canal, only they'll be smaller. Now some of the other trees, let's do a little bit on bark here. Around here, this is a good place to kind of start looking at recognizing, or starting your tree recognition with looking at bark. The deep furrowed grooves of this tree, combined with the fan-shaped leaves up above me, tell me it's a cottonwood. Then going right over this way, or going further back, you can see the tree with all the spines on it, the smoother bark, is a honey locust, whereas we shift here to bark that's a little bit more platy, a little fatter, and that would be a distant relative, the black locust. Continuing on with the theme of bark, one tree down here in the, I'll call it the bottomland forest, like swamp forest part of Canal Park, is we have the honey locust, which is real easy. Somewhat smooth bark, but interspersed with spines covering the bark. Now, not all honey locusts will have these spines, but the ones I'm seeing here do have the spines. Very close by is a tree in the same family, not necessarily in the same genus. And there's one right back here, the one that has the lower broken limb, and that is the black locust. Both these plants are in the bean family. Now, what resemblance do they have to the beans? Well, there's one of the cool ways to tell a locust is once the leaves come on, is by these what we call alternate pinnated leaves. Now this tree here is showing some branches down low, so this is an opportunity, the leaves are just emerging. You can see the very bean like leaves, and both plants being in the bean family will have pea-like flowers when they bloom. Both of them have pods. And I'm sort of looking around on the ground for any pods from last year. There's a couple of ways that you can tell them that pods is that this honey locust will have extremely long pods, probably 6 to 8 inches long, whereas the black locust, the one right back over here, will have shorter pods, maybe 2 to 4 inches long. If you have a redbud anywhere nearby and you see the pods on a redbud tree, you'll know some similarity. Another way to tell the tree is by their thorns. Now, this tree, scientific name, Buckeye tricanthus, is different from the black locust back here, which is you have to have the pseudoacacia, rubicinia pseudoacacia. All right, notice the thorns on the honey locust, extremely long, sharp, and they're branched. Whereas, and this is an older branch that had broken and fallen off this black locust, but you notice the thorns there tend, it's not the best example, but here's maybe a better one. Paired, just small paired thorns running along the branch. So that helps you tell the black locust from the honey locust, in addition to the coarseness of the bark versus the smoothness of the bark on the honey locust, the types of thorns, where they're at, and then later in the fall, the length of the bean-like pods they both produce. The black locust having very short pods, the honey locust having large curled pods that you can usually find around the tree on the ground.